Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here with my good friend, colleague, and co-host Jim Gurley. And Jim and I had a pretty interesting pregame discussion, as we typically do. This one was very, very cool on a number of different planes. And what we kind of figured we'd talk about, and I think it has something to do, Jim, with the time of year for sure, and some of the conversations we've had. But I think the year end, an assessment of the year end and bringing some things to conclusion. You know, we're in December, mid-December now. Christmas is a week away. I think the other two parts of that we talked about were any New Year's resolutions that one might be inclined. Some of us, I think, like those. Some of us don't. I'm not a big resolution guy because I haven't had any success with them in the past. And then the planning for next year, which is, goal setting, whatever. There's a number of different ways of looking at it. And I think to add, before I toss you the baton, you brought to the conversation one of your favorite self-help guys, not to belittle him with that title, but JIm Rohn. And so we've got some quotes from JIm Rohn, who everybody is pretty fond of. He's a pretty wise fellow, was a pretty wise fellow. So yeah, I mean, those some rich topics, Jim. Where do you want to go with that as I throw the baton over to you?
Yeah, well, I think it's common, right, at this time of the year, as we're in the final days of 2024, that it's the past, present, and future approach, right? You reflect on the past of the previous year in this case, and take an inventory of good things, bad things, things you learn, things you won't do again, things you will do. Um, and in the present, right now, you're going to start to make a plan for the future, and that's 2025, and based on a number of different events. So as I was doing this the last couple of days, as both of us have all our lives, right? Especially if you were in sales, like we were, you had to do projections, you had to do an evaluation of your accounts, and with those, I don't know about you, those were the worst moments, right? To the crystal ball. Oh, it's just, those are the, I don't miss that at all, right? Because you're asking to provide a crystal ball prediction of something you have really no control of. So yeah, and then I just happened to stumble across a JIm Rohn 15, 20-minute talk, and it just does a couple things. One, reminding me how much the world has changed, particularly with AI and what we're going into in 2025 and beyond, and then how much it hasn't changed, because he's, I think, without question, one of the greatest of all time. And how what he's saying today is 100% relevant, because he talks about it's wisdom, and it's quotes that apply, that are timeless forever. And so we'll share a couple of those, and then we'll go forward. But yeah, I do think it's a time of reflection, again, and gratitude. Obviously, you're grateful in 2024. I'll make a couple predictions, and I'd be interested in yours as well. But I'll speak for myself, and I think in general, I thought 2024 was the year of real change, or real events that will have a lasting effect for many, many years. I think 2024 was major changes, even in my case. And I feel good about some of the accomplishments, right? Personal and business and social accomplishments 2024. But 2025 is going to be decisive. Decisive, as those changes will be implemented, and we'll see those changes in ways like we've never had before, whether that's technology with AI, whether that's just the difference of a different administration, right? The direction we'll go, new opportunities, and some large entities, let's just say mainstream news, for example, will continue to fall. We'll see some giants fall. And I find that very exciting, but that also creates a major change as far as stability and all that. So, but yeah, let's start off with your predictions, or kind of inventory reflections of 2024, and then we'll get into the Jim Rohn quotes. I'll share my two favorites, which I'll share those right now. My favorite Jim Rohn quote is, "Don't wish it was easier, wish you were better." That's still one I live by every day. And the other one is, "To get what you want, you give others what they want." Uh, I'm pretty sure there was his. If they weren't, they were his that I modified, which I'm full disclosure do often. But anyway, what are your thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, well, I mean, just before I forget on that one, I think a lot of this stuff, and I joke about plagiarism all the time in my writing and my conversations. Like, as soon as you get out of school, there's no such thing as plagiarism.
Yeah.
Just how you get in trouble in school. But we all steal shit from everybody. And
Yeah. But doesn't Jim Rohn have a quote that refers to that? What about?
probably,
Yeah.
probably. I mean, it's wisdom, right? So it's like, whether it's Mark Twain or all the way back to the Stoics, or you go into the Bible, I mean, if it's really good, if it really truly is wise, and if it's around wisdom and personal responsibility for your own happiness,
Yeah.
then you'll find it everywhere. And I think some people just have a way of bringing it up at the right time, or saying it in the right way. And I think Jim Rohn was just a master at that.
Yeah. You know what else he was a master about optimism and hope of a better day. He loved his country. I think that's the other thing. He loved America, and I think towards the end of his life, he traveled a lot, and he would talk about that and how there's so many opportunities for those who want to work hard. And I think that is something that we've missed in recent years, right? The optimism and the things that are possible for those who want to work, for those who want to put the time in and the effort. And yeah, it's interesting you say that, but I think we would agree great leaders are dealers of hope, hope of a better day, hope of
No question. And I think, it also, to me, it's part of the wisdom journey, is like, the older you get, or the closer you get to being no longer, you either become wiser or you
yeah.
become resentful and regretful. And I think his decision was to become wiser and more grateful, appreciative,
Mm-hmm.
and reflected in his work and his writing and his speeches, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You've given me 5 or 6 of them, and I can go right one after the
Yeah,
other.
let's listen to him. Yeah.
So first one is, the topic is formal education, and Jim Rohn's quote is, "Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune." And,
I love that one. And
oh yeah,
yeah, in 2024, it's something I think I've shared this with you, Mark. I did I'd say a deep dive, but also a self-reflection on the fact that, I grew up with dyslexia, which and dysgraphia and a bunch of other things. But all that means is that I had to become an autodidactic learner. When what that means is I have very little to no formal education, right? It's all taught, and that's actually not that's something that is to be that's a compliment. That's not a negative, right? So but I do now that I hear that quote, it's probably what inspired me to do that, is to go learn the way I know how to learn, and then bring those products or services. Obviously, I'm an inventor, so I have 5 U.S. patents, and that comes from that autodidactic mind that I could have never learned in a classroom, and that's how that speaks to me. How about you? How do you?
oh yeah. I mean, I have been, and I'm not patting myself on the back. I've been writing about how ridiculous formal education is for a long, long time. Matter of fact, I was just, as you were talking, I told you earlier, Twain said something about this, so I looked it up. Mark Twain said, "Don't let schooling interfere with your education."
That's a good one. Uh, hey, again, timely, right?
Oh
How
yeah.
another, as I mentioned earlier, about the changes in 2025, about institutions completely falling apart because they've served their purpose. Mainstream media clearly is not. People don't believe it. They don't trust it. And education also belongs right there with them.
Academia, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and
No question about it. I think they're falling down because, it's like the investment of time and money has to return on the
that's
investment
right.
of money or it doesn't. And that system breaks down. And that's what's happening to me with academia and the media. It's like,
Well, and how they used it as a political tool to convince a young mind to think a certain way when that was never supposed to be part of our educational system. But it became that, and that's
education became indoctrination and now it's over. And
yeah, and it's clear because I think you would agree, or anybody would agree, we have a young generation of Americans that don't like their country, that don't like other groups, that are irritated and agitated. That didn't just happen. That happened. That was taught to them in most of the universities and K through 12 throughout the country.
yeah, I think that don't like their country, I would add to that the context of they don't understand or appreciate their
Yeah,
country. We
right.
haven't taught them history. We haven't taught them the right stuff. And accountability has been kind of has evaded us for quite some time now.
Hmm.
But yeah, number two is about control. Either you run the day or the day runs you.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's there's a lot packed into that one too. And in this world that we live in, where if you wake up in the morning and turn on your computer and open your email, your whole day is dictated by somebody else, and
Hmm.
and we do it all the time. And so this one, as true as it is, I think it's even more difficult to master for me.
Yeah, and in relationship to our framework, right? We typically start off our episodes by the five areas of our life, but in the center is ourself. And the more that I talk about that during the week, the more I guess clarity I get in about the two most important selves. I think we have a library of over 30 selves, right? But self awareness is number one, and number two, because I've experienced this so much in other people and even myself, is to be self aware of what's going on. Um, of course, to self discipline, but self control with the awareness, your self awareness that this is not good or this is good, but have the self control to execute it, or at least to be aware of it and not let that um, be your trigger or driver to make bad decisions. And so, yeah, self control is number two after self awareness. It's
Well, what I love about the self hyphen list that you created among many things is that a lot of times with me in life, something will precede something else. If you do this, then that happens.
Mhm.
These self dash words, they don't necessarily precede or follow one another. Self awareness leads to self reflection, or self reflection leads to self awareness, which might then lead to more self control,
Right.
which is led by self discipline, which is kind of fostered by self accountability. So it's
Mhm.
like they all, like our wheel. There's
Well,
no first, second, third, or fourth one. There's all of them. Put them in whatever order you want. You know.
yeah, absolutely. Like you said, and it all applies to these five areas of our life, right? In no particular order. Our relationship with money, right? Self control, self awareness, our relationship with others. Again, uh, mother, father, sister, girlfriend, wife, whatever. Our relationship with our career, and our relationship with our health, mental health, our physical health, and what always seems to be part of everything we do, especially at this stage in our life, is our worldview and our relationship with how we view the world. So,
Yeah, we're going to be talking, I would imagine, a lot about worldview in 2025. You just kicked it off, so
yeah.
well,
I love the worldview because it's such a driver of all the other ones, and it's just become so apparent, right? And remember, our subcategories of worldview is our childhood, of course, and then our spirituality, our religion, and how that drives us. And
yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting that you brought up self-discipline because it's the next quote.
Mm,
Not self-discipline as much as discipline, although they're very closely related
mm,
and be considered the same, I would imagine. But
mhm,
success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day.
mm.
And I think that what I get from that, among many other things, is this one of these ideas that you love, which is just show up, man. All you got to do is
Um,
you show up every day.
yeah.
Everything else gets easier. Show up prepared, show up on time, show up with the right attitude. It's just such a core, good, solid discipline, no pun intended. In
Wow. It's just like you said, it's so fundamental. And it used to be 80-20 world. I think we're moving to a 90-10 world. But yeah, yeah, it's hard to show up, but show up uh, on time, show up all the time, uh, show up prepared, show up with a good attitude. You just became part of the 90%. And that
you know,
means you make 90, that means you make 90% of the money. And
one of the things that reminds me of is how all the good things for me in life, whether they're rules that I follow or things I believe in or habits I like to try and replicate, is that all the good things that I've experienced have been challenging but they've all been simple, right? It's like these are not complex ideas, but they are difficult because it isn't easy to show up every day. I don't think you'd find many people that would say that it was.
mhm.
I think you'd find many people that would say, I showed up every day and it didn't work. I've never talked to such a person, you know?
Yeah, if you think about it, Mark, why are people so fascinated by watching professional sports, right? Whether that's professional basketball, professional baseball, any sport, even the Olympics, right? Sure, they're amazing genetic freaks of nature. That's you have to have that to even be in the realm of competing. But it is because the sacrifice and the discipline it takes to perform at that level is what people go to pay money to see.
Yeah. Yeah. We love now that we have the ability, and it's been that way for tens of years now, but the videotape of, Larry Bird running the stairs after the game, or Michael Jordan shooting the foul free throws, or Ted Williams, a ball hanging from a string in his hotel room 500 times a night on the road. It's like, you don't see that shit, right? But that's the reason that they perform the way they do when the cameras are on.
Yeah.
And so,
It also speaks to a conversation, we could do a whole episode on this, and that is with those disciplines also comes a cost, a sacrifice that discipline, your commitment to that, whatever that is, was at the cost of something else. And it could have been a relationship. It could have been a lot of things, your children, your spouse, your families, everything has a cost. And I think, again, we touched on this a little bit. With my experience about being around professional athletes, and again, I've had some very close friends at the highest level as a professional football player in NFL, or baseball player, and even as high as a coach or a manager for a major league team. And I reflect back on that, and about the at this stage in our life, uh, it had a cost. It seems like it was a lot of fun and fame, but what they have to sacrifice as far as their personal relationships and their time, and they never get that back. And so then, and I think you mentioned something about your brother too, right?
yeah, I was gonna bring up my dad, and my brother, both being commercial
Yeah,
pilots. When I told anybody growing up, and I didn't really tell people, people would ask, and sometimes I would share, yeah, my dad's a pilot. Oh, he must be gone all the time. And I'm like, not really. He's kind of like around all the time as far as I
yeah. Yeah, because when he was gone, he would sleep somewhere else. But when he was there, he was really there, right?
But more than that, my point was really this, because both my brother and my father, and I alluded to this earlier when I told you my brother's retiring and he was
Yeah,
making his bid. Well, the
yeah,
bid system as an airline pilot is you bid the previous month where you want to fly, from where to where, over what period of time the next month. And as you gain seniority, you can pick whatever you want.
Wow.
But at the beginning, you're celebrating Thanksgiving in a hotel in Columbus, Ohio.
Mm,
And so,
interesting. Kind of like nursing, right? Nursing's the same way.
yeah. But so as he gained seniority, like I didn't really know him when he didn't have seniority. He was my dad. He was already a captain. He was already one of the most senior captains.
Mhm.
He would do every month this is this choice he made because he didn't want to be that guy that sacrificed his family. So he bid around our baseball games, our graduation ceremonies. Dude, he never missed anything. But he also traveled to places guys at that level of seniority wouldn't choose to travel to for periods of time they wouldn't choose to travel because his choice was that is not something I'm going to give up. I'm going to give up this instead of that.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, and it's
But back to disciplines, right? It speaks to
yeah,
the disciplines of prioritizing what was important to him at that time. Yeah.
I think it's why we see athletes retire young and coaches retire young. And sometimes even celebrities that disappear from the limelight, it's just like, I want my life back. I want my family back. I want my personal relationships back. And so it'd be interesting to have some of those conversations. But the next one of Jim Rohn's quotes is also about discipline. It's the pain of discipline. We must all suffer from one of two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret.
Mhm.
Discipline weighs ounces, regret weighs tons. And you talk about a topic for looking back on the year, like regret is like it's an enemy of mine. I try not to let it be a big enemy constantly haunting me, but man, regret is that's a very interesting topic, and the discipline that you show when you don't feel like showing it every day really lessens the what you have to look at in terms of regrets over a period of time.
Yeah, again, these quotes are reminding me of these almost like mantras that I live by that are embedded in my head. And again, I'm sure I've hacked some of Jim Rohn's material, but the one that I've made a decision many years ago is that I would rather live um, in my world. Uh, yeah, that goes. I would rather live in my world than to live in someone else's world, well, with regret, right? And what it's saying is, there is a decision. You're gonna stay true to who you are, your beliefs, your you know what you truly believe in. But if you surrender that to somebody else, then you've given, then you're going to live in their world, and that world, that's regret. That's a world of regret.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'd rather die in my world than live in regret in somebody else's world. That's the version of that, meaning that is a conscious decision. If somebody is at a point where there's just no way that I could we could come to a common ground, uh, I would rather die than to have to live in regret in their world and then be miserable, be a complainer. This is our famous line, right? We grow older, we grow better or bitter. It's a decision. But when you're living in regret, you are living with bitterness. And,
oh, it's I love that. I love the bitter better thing. I use it all the time. Ever since you first shared it with me, I've been kind of like talk about plagiarism.
they're like I said, they're hacks of
Yeah,
one to the other. But
but
yeah,
but I think that the way that I feel about regret is kind of twofold, and this is a reflection back on 2024 to some extent, but back on my life. We have, I think that everyone, it's easy to have regrets. You can't get everything right. You have to fuck shit up. I mean, you're not human if you don't. So what do you do with that regret is the thing that interests me at this juncture in my life, which is, well, it doesn't serve me to regret anything because if there's still something to be learned from something I fucked up, so be it. I'll try and learn that. But to wallow in the fact that I shoulda, woulda, coulda is really toxic. It'll kill you. And so I focus on putting that regret aside, asking for forgiveness for me from God, which he grants me without, further request, and then move forward. And talk about an oversimplification. That is a very challenging thing for me, but it's something I strive to do every day because I don't want to sit in regret at all. It does me no good whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me of something I came up with there, reading something, and again, it's a quote or a phrase that I'm playing in my mind, and that is, life is hard, and if it's not hard, you're not trying hard enough. There is something to say for that, right? Life is hard,
Yep.
if it's not, that means you're just not trying enough. That you're not living your fullest life. It's designed to be hard, and it doesn't mean that you take time to enjoy it and have happiness and fulfillment. I'm not saying it's all work, but if it's too easy, then you're not trying hard enough, right? You're not challenging yourself enough.
No, absolutely, and it's funny that you bring that up because I'll tie it, and again, I'm plagiarizing, but it's also life is hard, and my daughter, if you remember, she gave her company the name Get a Helmet, right?
Yeah,
Life is hard, get a helmet, and that
and-
first time I heard that was in a Dennis Leary stand-up comedy routine from, like, the '80s.
yeah,
I don't know if he stole it from someone else, but that's how I look at life being hard. Dude,
yeah,
fucking helmet. Stop complaining, like you're gonna bump into shit, you know?
yeah.
So
Well, and again, also the greatest moments of life is when you have an achievement or an accomplishment. And if you didn't have to do something that was hard to receive that, then it's not going to be very fulfilling. So, yeah, I think it's dangerous to tell, especially children, that everything needs to be fun and easy. Again, I'm not saying live in misery, but accomplishments require you to stretch yourself and to do things you wouldn't normally do. It's not about just staying in a comfort zone of
yeah, I think one of the things, talking about where we've come as a country and where we hope to go as a country, and that's one of them to me. When I was growing up, when we were growing up, a couple of the phrases I remember was, get up and rub some dirt on it, dude. Just get up
yeah,
and rub some dirt on it. The other one was like no pain, no gain. My whole high school football team had red shirts and white lettering. It was no
yeah.
every game day, no pain, no gain. But it's like, yeah, that's a little kind of
Yeah, we went a little over the top a little bit. I agree, but I appreciate you said I call it the Vince Lombardi era because yeah, that's what we grew up with.
well, I mean, fortitude is
The coaching style, I should say, was the Vince Lombardi coaching style, right?
yeah. So where is that happy medium between being strong, having fortitude, being resilient, and being too harsh or hard on someone or forcing someone into a painful situation? It's in between somewhere, but it's like
Always
not all the way over here and it's not all the way here. It's both, you
right.
know?
Yeah,
And Jim, the last one, I'm going to skip one. I'm going to go to the last one because we're bumping up against our time commitment. But the last one is walls. The walls we build around us to keep sadness out also keep out the joy.
mm,
Yeah, yeah.
and
That to me is about vulnerability.
yeah,
you know, you have fortitude are the walls that we put up to protect ourselves or protect our family or protect our kids or our friends or whatever. But you know what? I mean, love is about extending yourself and being vulnerable, at least in my experience and in
yeah.
my lifetime. And you have to be vulnerable to grab onto all the joy available to you. But it makes life a little more risky. It makes you more vulnerable. And I that's a wonderful topic, probably a whole podcast episode.
It is. It's a good one. I just put one on in the chat. Read that last one. We'll wrap this up because I think it concludes this episode or the theme of this episode. Yeah.
Yeah, you alluded to it earlier. If you don't design your own life plan, chances are you'll fall into someone else's plan. And guess what they have planned for you? Not much.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that's some good stuff, though, right? But right, and so the other one is when people start talking about their problems. I realized, especially at this stage in my life, their problems are so much more important than your problems,
Oh, yeah.
and that's a human thing. That's not an insult. That's just being aware, self-aware. Their their problems in their life are so much more important than your problems. Whether they try to pretend that they care or not, they don't care as much. Yes,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's
No one, how you doing? No one gives a shit. It's like, No, it's I think, from a takeaway standpoint, because I think that was so much fun. We could have gone so much deeper into all those areas. Hopefully we triggered a couple of switches to go off in some people. But if you never Jim Rohn, I think it's ROH,
Ah,
is that correct?
yeah, Jim Rohn is Rohn. Jim
Okay.
Rohn. Yeah, yeah. You can Google him and say famous quotes, and
I would
yeah,
say you never heard of that guy, look him up, and then would
absolutely.
go would go Mark Twain all the way back to the Stoics, because if this wisdom thing turns you on, if you want to go deeper and
Yeah,
dig a little more, those are three good starting points, at least in my estimation.
yeah. Great advice. So, all right, Mark. Until next week.
Thanks, Jim. See you, man. Have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you as well.
Thanks, man.